My name's Ethan Diven. I'm the host of Thinking Inside the Box, the Gauntlet, the podcast of the operations group at the National Training Center here at Fort Irwin, California, as part of NTC's Warrior Chronicles. The Gauntlet drives warfighting by talking to leaders from our joint force about the crucible of ground combat, leadership, training, and fighting at the crown jewel of our Army. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Lieutenant Colonels Kyle Trottier and James Small, battalion commanders in the Strike Brigade, 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team, 1st Armored Division, who are in an awesome position to reflect on their recent experiences during Rotation 2507. Fellas, I'm going to ask you to reflect on what you've learned from this leadership experience in contact while fighting your combined arms battalions, because it will inform future leaders across our Army. Thanks for joining us today. What I'd like to ask, and I'm going to start with you, James,
Sure.
Just introduce yourself a little personally, a little professionally, and then we'll turn it over to Kyle.
Sir, thanks for having us this morning. I'm James Small. I'm the commander of 1st Battalion, 6th United States Infantry Regiment, the regulars formed during the War of 1812. I joined the Army in 2006, commissioned out of West Point. Infantry officer, diverse background in sort of all types of ABCTs, IBCTs, SBCTs, little time in the range regiment, a few other units. I recently served as an OC myself at Hohenfels, Germany, and then I took command of the regulars last summer, about 10, 11 months ago, sir.
You should be very proud of how your battalion fought. Kyle, how about you?
Proud husband and father, got an amazing wife, 4 awesome kids, and commissioned in 2005 from Texas Christian University. Most recently, I did my field grade time at 3rd Infantry Division, and then went to HRC, where I got to be a career manager, and now commanding 1st Battalion, 37th Armor.
We served together at 3rd Infantry Division, the Rock of the Marne. So I am so proud of the two of you, getting to see you as field grade officers, that the Army selected you, to command combined arms battalions, and you will continue to make just an incredible impact on our Army. And I was honored to be able to watch you fight here. So incredibly powerful. So right out of the gate, what were your biggest lessons from this rotation? Kyle, I'm going to come to you.
The commanders being able to understand, visualize, describe, direct. It's something you learn at the career course, but as you are out here actually commanding a formation, you see that this is actually true. The doctrine for the offense, the doctrine for the defense, the fundamentals, the principles all apply. And so when you actually use the doctrine, it actually helps your life make sense. The next most important piece is transitions, and learning to make a transition a very deliberate operation. So if you get the task to conduct an offensive operation, seize an objective, you tend to get focused on that task, but you have to deliberately plan your transition from the offense to the defense, and you have to give clear task and purpose to your subordinates, and work that into your execution checklist, and ensure that you rehearse those things. And where I found myself evolving to is constantly asking in my S3, where are we at in the X-check? What's next? To help me continue to see forward and to know, okay, we're about to seize the objective. Now I need to start pushing the bulldozers forward. Now I need to start pushing the Class 4 forward to prepare for the defense. And if I didn't do that, it would take too long to transition to the defense, and I'm not putting the battalion in a position to be successful for the next phase of the operation. I want to give a shout out to the leader training program here at the National Training Center. At LTP, they coached us to think through saying, am I in position ready to, and then by warfighting function, start to ask some questions. Am I in position ready to collect information, to fire? Is my sustainment in position ready to sustain or to treat and medicate and evacuate soldiers? Am I in position ready to communicate? And that framework really proved to be true. And if I did that, it helped me to have the tactical patience to say, I'm not in position ready to do the task I'm assigned to do. And then it taught me to have the courage to either have patience or to communicate effectively to my higher headquarters and say, sir, I am not in position ready to do this. I need more time. Sir, I need more suppressive fires from the field artillery. And so to be able to use that framework to help me to identify problems, to communicate up to my headquarters to help them solve their problems.
Thanks for the shout out. So we've knitted, LTP, making you think, commander roles, responsibilities, position, and communication to get ready to fight for what you just experienced. James, how about you?
I have two. That number one is that commander's intent is not universally understood. So I learned the repercussions of of my intent not being understood at echelon. And if I'm looking at how our battalion operated, we did best when my commander's intent was understood and executed, and we did the worst when it was me sort of micromanaging and piecemealing the employment of the battalion in our fight. So, constant communication, making that part of my PCC and PCI of subordinate units to ensure they understand my intent. And then secondly serves the compounding impact of my decisions or lack of decisions. And when you're training, you might not see it. You might not see it in a CPX environment, but me seeing firsthand a soldier not getting the sleep they need, me seeing firsthand a company having to rush through TLPs because of a lack of a decision or the wrong decision during the fight. And that goes into the 1/3, 2/3. But the example, the decision I made at Razish to pull back to try to communicate with my commander, and then seeing the real impact of that on my soldiers, on their preparation for the next day's mission. That was something that really stood out to me during this training event.
Would you say that was harder than you expected, is where you needed to place yourself during the fight? It is always lower's responsibility to maintain comms with higher, and maneuvering your network, not just yourself, to make that happen.
I'm more comfortable in the main command post. That's how I've grown up. That's how I like to fight. And I didn't feel comfortable out with my mobile command group or with my TAC, that I had access to the information, that I was able to accurately describe the fight to my commander. So in that instance, I tried to get back and get in contact with him, but it might not have been the right decision at the time.
And there's this tension where we want to be where the action is so we can physically see it and drive it. But in reality, we need to probably be where the information is.
That's right.
So we can best see, understand, do our commander activities that you alluded to. Because doctrine's sound, it's the application of it that is challenging.
Sometimes it's hard for infantry officers because we learn from day one, be with the assault element. That's where you belong. So sometimes it's uncomfortable for us to not be there. But I really use my CSM in that role to sort of fill my void so I could be where I needed to be.
That's a great topic to get to right now. What's the role of the command sergeant major in a combined arms battalion? What'd you guys learn?
I, as the commander, am looking forward, and I'm driving the organization forward. But the command sergeant major is looking backwards, and he's pulling the logistics trains forward and ensuring that we're getting fuel and ammunition and the food to the soldiers. He's looking backwards and looking at the positioning of our role one. So are we in a position to treat and evacuate our soldiers when they're wounded? And so he's looking backwards, I'm looking forward, and his ability to look backwards is enabling me to continue to drive the formation forward. And it definitely was not easy. Doing a west to east rotation, we had at one point a 60-kilometer line of communications from our rear to our front. And so to be able to deliver those capabilities on time to supply us, it took the full weight of the non-commissioned officer corps with the command sergeant major and the first sergeants to make that happen.
Command sergeant major corps did a lot in that, but I learned, and I guess advice I would give is, don't be afraid to employ your commander, your CSM in a tactical role. In my mind, I placed him at the decisive point for our combined arms breach, and I think he won the day because he was able to incorporate the enablers where I needed them. He was able to maintain the tempo and the pace based off of his experience. So I think the conventional wisdom of applying them in the sustainment logistics, the CASEVAC, 100% sound. Don't hesitate to put them at the decisive point of the tactical mission and use their experience and inspirational leadership to get the job done.
I think what I liked out of both of your responses is it depends. What does your formation need at that point in time? We quickly default to, hey, go to the friction point and make good stuff happen, but we won't talk about what that is, because it may be you've got a 60, G-lock from your UMCP all the way up to the flot, or brigade is counting on you to maintain tempo through the breach when it's open. Your battalion command sergeant major is screaming over the command net, hurry up and move, because brigade's counting on us.
We were focused on the operations process, and then I used the command sergeant major and the non-commissioned officer corps to then do the PCCs. So we could be doing those activities in parallel. And so he's down there going tank to tank, crew to crew, validating their uniforms, their prep to fire checks, asking them for the mission statement. Do you understand your weapons control statuses? And ensuring that that my intent was clearly understood down to each and every individual crew. And then we would come back together before the execution of the mission. And so that was another successful way that we divided and conquered the task and purpose of the officers versus the non-commissioned officers.
Our Army has started saying we need to empower the non-commissioned officer corps. I agree with that, but the next step is we need them to enforce those things that need strict compliance at the lowest level, pre-combat checks and inspections. I mean, Command Sergeant Major Lavender, he drove the engagement area multiple times for you guys, because who's got more reps in executing a defense? You know, who has more reps than seeing what kind of tempo, distribution, intervals between combat platforms than Command Sergeant Major Coyle.
Yeah, and enabler integration too.
Absolutely, because you get more people and stuff than you're used to training at home station here. You know, whether it's that engineer company, MSHORADs, we make it super complex here. Awesome. So let's take what you have learned from, you know, the sweat, the dust, you know, the broken vehicles, you know, the frustrations with communication, how you delineated roles, responsibilities, the O's versus the NCOs. If you could give yourself guidance, you know, the previous you as a battalion commander was caught 3-6 months ago, what kind of guidance, focus would you give to yourself based on what you've just accomplished?
What I want to drive is culture within the organization. And what I mean by that is getting into a tactical frame of mind with everything that we do. And I think we learned some bad habits during gunnery, running a range in a very administrative manner. And so whether that's just keeping your gun tube orientation up and down range at all times, you know, so it's not training gunners to have their guns down and to be scanning, to running, submitting a log stat on time and actually having your trains run off of your logistics reports instead of just an administrative refuel at 06 and 1800 every day. So those are cultural things that we can do at home station to create a tactical mindset, or using operational graphics and overlays and map boards even during gunnery, because it's forcing you to think, where's the red pin? Let's put the enemy icon out there. Where are the obstacles? We'll get the green pin out there. And to just start to really think about these things more in a tactical mindset to create that winning culture versus, hey, this is just an administrative task that we're going to do.
Don't underestimate the value of your presence. Certainly not the best battalion commander on the planet, but you know, the commander's presence at the point of friction, at the decisive point in planning and rehearsing. I didn't quite grasp how important my presence was, and if I'm looking at where the battalion failed, likely it's places that I was not at the moment where I needed to be. So, you know, understanding that, and then agree with Kyle, like a much more, you know, much earlier and much more frequent sort of tactical mindset. Some examples: TACSOP focus LPDs. You know, we did our generic, you know, area defense, engagement area development, but I would have overlaid the terrain that we were likely going to be fighting on with our fighting tools and focused our LPDs more on that and less on the generic, you know, 8 steps of engagement area development. I would have applied it to where we were going to fight. Remove the rangeisms from the training earlier. You know, one issue we had was with our battle space geometry, ops graphics. You know, I would have enforced that for our movement from our cantonment area to range 66 at Fort Bliss to get that in everyone's mindset of the requirements of that. And then, you know, no administrative moves. Everything is tactical. Everyone is going to a tactical assembly area using a route with the appropriate graphics to control that. Because I underestimated how difficult it was. I've never maneuvered a freaking battalion, right? Like, especially a mounted, you know, combined arms battalion. I underestimated how difficult it would be to put all those pieces into position when my boss needed them there.
We all have amazing tax ops, and it'll lay out the steps of engagement area development. But did my platoon leaders ever reference that? You know, if that was part of our deliberate train up, then they would have that in their pocket and they would know to reference it. But because it was not integrated in that way, I think, you know, we failed at some points out here because we didn't use the tools that were on hand with us. And the commander's presence, upon reflection, I think one of the things I realized is that Tom Brady or that Kobe Bryant type moment where, you know, you're down 28-3, and you just have to have the will to drive that organization, the will to win. And there were times where I failed to recognize that the momentum of the organization was slowing. The changes on the battlefield were happening, and I failed to recognize that. And all of a sudden, you're wondering, why are we stopped? Why are we not accomplishing the mission? And then it just takes the will of the commander to overcome that adversity and to drive that organization forward. And so I learned I really have to be sensitive to the reports I'm receiving, to interpret that and understand what is actually happening, because my command presence is going to be needed in some way, shape, or form. And how am I doing that? And how am I informing my higher command? Hey, I've got a real problem out here. I'm losing combat power, and I think I need some help, or I need some more time. And how am I creating those conditions with my presence to drive us to victory? Otherwise, those moments happen, and now you're on the wrong side.
And commanders are only as good as the information they are given,
Yeah.
and they make the least worst decision sometime with that information. So would you add specificity in reporting as well as the assessment, the so what, in how you train your subordinates to report?
ACE reports, salute reports, SALT reports. That was something that I think we failed to properly train during our sticks. But hey, if you're truly getting BDA, and if you're doing an ammo count after every engagement, that needs to come up, because it's going to inform how much combat power I have left and what can I do with that combat power. So absolutely, we have to train just using the Army formats that we're given, but we actually have to do it.
The vernacular of commanders, the language of
Yeah.
commanders.
Yeah.
I think we were coached pretty hard on it here, but I would have started months ago, even in a garrison environment of, risk and recommendations. And my commanders started understanding it better. I started understanding it better, but why that's helpful when you're in the fight, and not just here's where I am, here's what I'm doing, here's how much ammo I have, but like why. And getting young company commanders, some with only 4 or 5 years in the Army, to start thinking like that was something I would have done. What would have started in our train-ups?
I think it then allows you to have the courage to speak up. If we're using that commander's language and we're assessing risk and we're providing recommendations, you're comfortable with speaking the truth and saying, I'm short time, I'm short resources, I need help. And your commander is then going to be receptive to receiving that, knowing that you're giving him that honest feedback. And the unique opportunity here you don't want to miss at the National Training Center, they use phrases like generational leadership development happens here. And you don't want to miss that opportunity to show a platoon leader or a company commander what a good op order looks like, what a good rehearsal looks like, what good PCCs look like for those non-commissioned officers. And so if you have the courage to ask for a couple more hours so that you can teach them these good things and teach them good habits now, that carries forward for years to come, where that captain as a future major and battalion commander will know what right looks like, because you had the courage to ask for 4 more hours before you attack that objective.
Commanders want to know that we can always get to yes,
Yeah.
but it's going to come at a cost, whether it's risk to mission, risk to force. If you need more time, or you're only going to get 75% of what you expected.
Right.
We like to talk in terms of minimum force requirements,
Yes.
conditions that are required, and if we're not going to achieve those, that's just risk. We can still do it, but it'll come at a cost.
That's right.
So how will this experience change the way you're going to lead in the future?
Communicating intent and roles and responsibilities. You always say you expect from your subordinates how you were at that rank on your last day of doing that job. I didn't adequately articulate my expectations either prior to the rotation or on just a day-to-day fight of what my expectations of my field grades were, of my company commanders, and just being much more deliberate and mindful about delivering those expectations. To steal from Tarantula 07, something he was really focused with me was live in the future, but occasionally visit the present. So I think I really took away my role as a commander of ensuring success at the tactical fight, but the preponderance of my focus needs to be sort of what's next and what's after that. So that will definitely change how I approach training or combat.
Learning how to be more effective with command language, like James talked about, and then having the courage to speak up and say, I have a problem, I need some additional time, resources, I need some help. And so I think moving forward, that's going to definitely help me as a leader to be more effective, because our role is always to help solve our higher headquarters problems. Yeah. And so if I'm not comfortable telling my higher headquarters that I have a problem, then we're not going to be able to accomplish that mission.
Up to this point, lots of golden nuggets that I'm sure folks are going to write down as they train at home station, whether or not they have a rotation here in the future. But what advice would you give to leaders that are preparing to come to the MTC here in the future?
So you have an expectation of, a staff section or a subordinate leader or even yourself when you got 7 hours of sleep and you slept at home and you had a full 3 meals a day. I would try to inject some NTC type stress earlier so you can really understand how your people are going to react. And then, an early morning or a late night movement as a battalion, for instance, in a field training environment, and you really start to see how your organization is going to respond. And then I'll go back. The other thing is like the CSM is a game changer. I would go back and I would have very real conversations with your command sergeant major about what you need out of this rotation, and then honestly, there's no limit to how they can impact the success of the organization. That's what I would apply, sir. And then the tax op focused preparation.
So I'll go back to building that winning culture, starting with maintenance. So the moment that track stops, that crew is dismounting and they are conducting PMCS, where it's just ingrained into their DNA. And that they know that platform inside and out, and that they're very comfortable filling out the 5988s, and that we can make the maintenance enterprise work for them to support them in the accomplishment of the mission. The lethality culture, that mindset, growing from an administrative focus on a garrison range to just building that lethality mindset with everything that you do. But the thing that I failed the most at and would want to go back and do all over again is the integration of our enablers and our attachments. The first time I met our attached engineer company was at midnight on Crash Hill, as we're supposed to be digging fighting positions and placing turn obstacles in a volcano minefield. And it was very chaotic, and we had about 8 hours to storm and get ready to fight an enemy, and that was not ideal. And then the attachments of our forward observers and our fire support cell. I would have loved to have done all that earlier. Yeah. The attachment of the short range air defense artillery was something that we couldn't have done just because they're from a different geographical installation. But I would have loved to have done some MS Teams calls and figured out who they are and what they do and how we employ them best. So I think being very deliberate with the attachments and enablers as part of that train up, so you can have that working relationship prior to getting in the box, would be essential.
Comrel means something.
Yeah.
And we have a saying in our battalion that we treat our attachments better than our own, right?
Yeah.
But when it came to tactical employment here, I was so focused on my battalion and getting them in the fight, and we had some tactical failures because I failed to pull that commander in, share SOPs, give them priorities of work, and then the protected assets, the MSHORAD, integrating them and giving my team the focus that we have a responsibility in employing and ensuring their safe passage on behalf of the brigade. I don't think we did that well. If I could do it all over again, absolutely focus on the Comrel and how that can lead to success or failure of the battalion.
So which forward support company is processing their 5988s, and which clerks are going and getting their parts, and how does it get onto your log pack? Because engineers have weird stuff and ADA has weird stuff, and it's not a Tank or a Bradley, and I don't know how to fix it. And so needing to define that stuff before you get in the box is absolutely essential.
Incredible feedback for the next generation of leaders at Echelon from two incredible Combined Arms Battalion commanders that were highly successful, although it feels like, your knees are scraped and you still don't know how to ride your bike, but you should be very proud of what your formation accomplished, how you enabled the Strike Brigade. So thanks to Bandit 6 and Lieutenant Colonel Kyle Trottier and Regular 6, Lieutenant Colonel James Small, for your time, exceptional insights, your candid feedback, because what you also are teaching everybody is it's okay to say, I failed at this, but I am not a failure. Because that is not the culture of either of your organizations. It was a pleasure to fight with your team during 2507. The Strike Brigade, as always, our observer coach trainers are on your team. We invite you to look at our Mill Suite pages. We've got tons of stuff that's hung that can be useful as you head back to home station, prepare for that next mission that is ahead of all of you. Latest products. You can subscribe to TAC Talks on YouTube for quick hitting lessons. And thanks for listening to Thinking Inside the Box, the Gauntlet, brought to you by the Warrior Chronicles here at the National Warfighting Training Center. Train the force, lead, train, win. Now let's go fight.